Give me liberty or give me death. This phrase is known to have been said by one of the founding fathers in 1775, just before the Revolutionary War. During this time period, Patrick Henry, who was in this picture and is also the author of this quote, argued for independence and the rights of American citizens. Even though this act of mutiny could have cost him his life, Patrick Henry, among other founding fathers, still believed in the inalienable right that is freedom. Good morning, my name is Valentina Diaz, and today we'll be talking and discussing about the influence of the First Amendment in a 21st century civil rights movement. Now, the inquiry being analyzed today is to what extent does the national anthem protest exemplify the rights given to citizens via the First Amendment? Based on this question, the postulation that I will be affirming during today's presentation is that the national anthem protest is a 21st century protest that takes full advantage and exemplifies the rights and limitations of the First Amendment. Now, the importance of the First Amendment is seen throughout history. In the citizens' perspective, it is a way of ensuring their fundamental rights, while in the government's perspective, the First Amendment and its limitations is what separates and divides freedom from anarchy. Now, in a larger context, globally, no other country grants as many freedoms as the United States grants its citizens. The purpose of the First Amendment is to stop the government from interfering with these rights. These 45 words embody many ideas of the meaning of liberty to this country. Now, before analyzing the First Amendment's influence, one must understand what it states in its original context, the Constitution. As you can see here, it states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, we need to specifically focus on the part where it says the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition the government. This section is what allows the citizens to protest against the government with a redress of grievances, those being items that can be found unlawful or unconstitutional. By the same token, however, the First Amendment does not grant absolute freedom to citizens to do whatever they please. Interpretations of the First Amendment are created as the Constitution is interpreted as court cases are presented to the Supreme Court, such as Tinker v. Des Moines, Brown v. Board of Education, or Texas v. Johnson. Such limitations being time, place, and manner. Time being when a person can exercise his freedom of speech, freedom of protest or speech. Place refers to the person's location in regards to the person's location of interrupting traffic flow or public order or even vandalizing property. Manner being one of the most crucial ones is the conduct and the diction that a person may use while protesting or using freedom of speech. In this picture, this was taken in Maryland in January 2017 when protesters were protesting against the inauguration of President Donald Trump in response to his comments of racism that were said throughout the electoral campaign. As you can see, their time, place, and manner are all incorrect because they're in the middle of the street, so they're blocking traffic. There's fires, so they're promoting vandalism and violence, and they are not portraying the freedom of speech in a correct way. Now, applying these limitations to protest is what maintains the balance of the citizens and their First Amendment. Unfortunately, many of such protests right now in the 21st century, in comparison to the original civil rights movement, lose sight of the message that they are trying to convey and turn violent. For example, in these two protests that I have here, the first one being the Oakland protest of November 5, 2010. These are all against police brutality, where 150 civilians were arrested for vandalism when they decided to break windows, tear down fences, and set things on fire in response to the death of Oscar Grant, who was shot and killed by a BART police officer. And on the second picture, I have the Ferguson unrest, which happened throughout Missouri following the shooting and the death of Michael Brown, who was shot by the police. The police responded with tear gas, sound cannons, police dogs, concussion grenades, and even wooden and rubber bullets. Before comparing the 21st century civil rights movement, we must go back to the 1960s civil rights movement, where African American men took to the streets to wear a sign where they said, "I am a man," to portray and to make sure that people knew that they were equal to the white men as were black men. The 1960s civil rights movement was famously led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who can be found in both of these two pictures, who is remembered for advocating for African American rights and his consistency with his nonviolent approach. In the second picture, where he's saying his "I Have a Dream" speech at the Lincoln Memorial, he called for civil and economic rights and an end to racism. As you can see in the last picture, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested in 1963 in Birmingham, Alabama, because of protesting in that city. Birmingham, Alabama was one of the harder, more difficult cities for African Americans to live. While he was there, he wrote a letter to 8 clergymen who accused Dr. King of ulterior motives and acts of violence. In this letter, King rejected these unjust accusations by saying, "I must confess that I am not afraid of the word tension," meaning that the nonviolent tension that he had created with all his nonviolent approach was necessary in order to promote the growth and the change of the African American rights. And he also stated that freedom is never voluntary, given by the oppressor, it must be demanded by the oppressed, saying that in this time and era, that the oppressors were not going to willingly give those rights back to the African Americans, and that the oppressed were in the situation where they had to take charge. "Blowing in the Wind" was a song created by Bob Dylan during this time period and was only released a month after the letter to Birmingham jail was made public. It talked about the change and how violence to wars and civil matters was not the answer. It also talks about how equality and civil unrest is not good. Now, the national anthem protest started with quarterback Colin Kaepernick from the San Francisco 49ers. He started this whole movement of kneeling and sitting during the national anthem in order to protest the police brutality that had been occurring throughout this time period so long. He used his platform as a athlete to further advance things and to bring light to justice. The national anthem protest was not taken well by many people, and they wondered whether or not it was under the First Amendment. In these 2 court cases, Texas v. Johnson and Tinker v. Des Moines, it is proved that not all types of speech are spoken. In Texas v. Johnson, Johnson burned the flag in response to President Ronald Reagan's policies. He was arrested under the Texas law that desecration of the flag was illegal, but he argued that it was a symbolic form of speech. As well, in this other picture, siblings Tinker, they were suspended because of wearing armbands, and they protested that they were under the symbolic form of speech as well. Now, the controversy that there has been a widespread disapproval against the national anthem protest because it is believed to have been disrespecting the country and the military. In these 2 pictures, our President Donald Trump says that NFL players should be fired due to the fact that they are disrespecting the flag and military. But as proven in the 2 court cases, the greater context, the citizens and even our president are allowed to disapprove the protest and freely speak because of the First Amendment, just as the national anthem protest has the right to do so, due to it not being just based on the fact whether or not people like it or not. Thank you. What questions do you have?
2 questions for you. 1, what evidence did you gather that you didn't use, and then why'd you choose to not use it?
The evidence that I didn't gather was the Nike campaign video that was called the Just Do It, Dream It campaign, and the narrator was Colin Kaepernick, and it was a message that Nike sent out to support the fact that Colin Kaepernick had been released from his job and everything because of these protests, and it had gone against the country. So Nike released it in order to put out a statement that they were with him as well. I didn't use it because I thought it would take too much away from the fact that I was trying to prove the First Amendment and the court cases.
Okay. And if you had more time, what additional research would you have done?
I would have gone in deeper to the NFL contracts in regards with the players, because since they are under terms of contract with their teams, they could be sued, but it is also not explicitly stated in those contracts, and they are possibly reaching to an agreement to change it in the future.
You're done. Breathe.